So hey guys, in this video we're going to be talking about how browsers work. Now, modern browsers are composed of many different components. You have the UI, the user interface, you have the rendering engine, you have the JavaScript interpreter, you have the network component, you have the backend UI. So there's obviously many different components of the modern browser. But in this video, I want to focus on the rendering part of the browser because as SEO professionals and web professionals, that's the part that we are concerned with the most because that is what makes the web page appear in the browser to the user. Now, as you can see in front of you is a slide that briefly explains the rendering process. And this is the initial part of the rendering process. Now, what I'm going to do is attach to this video a resource where you can go and find out for yourself in a lot more detail about how the whole process works, about how the whole process of rendering a page in the browser works. And you can also go and find out in more detail how browsers work in total. Now, let's just focus on the slide in front of us. When the browser receives a web page, what it starts to do is it starts to parse the elements. Now, parsing is a technical term. It's when the computation of the syntax and the elements gets done and puts it into computer meaningful language, computer meaningful grammar. Now, you can read up about that in more detail, and it will be part of the resource that I attached to this lecture. But let's just focus on the slide now. When the browser starts to render a page, i.e. when it starts to make a page appear in the browser, what it does is it creates a DOM. Now DOM stands for Document Object Model. It's technically an API. So what it does, it takes the HTML of the web page and starts to create a document tree, just like I've put here in this graphic. Now it takes the elements of the HTML page and creates nodes. So for example, you have the HTML document type, you have the head section of the HTML, which contains metas, the page title. Then it creates the body section, which has p tags, div tags, h1 tags. Now, if you're familiar with HTML, you'll understand what this means. And tip here, if you're not familiar with HTML, as an SEO, it's really good to be familiar with HTML. Now, this process that you can see in front of you on this slide, these things happen concurrently. So as the browser starts to create the DOM, it then starts to create the CSS object model. Now that is very similar to the HTML DOM. It starts to create a map of all the CSS elements like class IDs and things that are in the CSS file that are related to the web page. Now it does this so it can understand the look and feel of the web page, which is what CSS is all about. Another tip, if you don't know or not familiar with CSS, as an SEO, it's really good to be familiar with CSS because it all relates to the web page. Now, as these processes are happening, what the browser also does is it does a preload scan. As part of the browser, there's something called a preload scanner. What that does is fetches all the essential resources that are related to the web page. For example, images, JavaScript files, CSS files. It does this in the background so that we don't get bottleneck or blockages in the web page appearing to the user, because the browser wants the page to appear to the user as quickly as possible. Now, also as part of the rendering process is the JavaScript compilation. If there is JavaScript to be compiled, which is very normal in modern browsers, in modern websites, there's a lot of JavaScript being used nowadays. It gets the JavaScript, it compiles it and executes it. Again, so it doesn't create blockages. Now, why am I telling you this? As an SEO, you are probably going to be doing a lot of audits and most likely performance audits. Now, in these performance audits, such as Lighthouse, typically you will always see something that says, oh, don't block JavaScript resources or defer JavaScript resources. What that means is JavaScript can often block the rendering of the web page because the browser wants to do that first. Now, if JavaScript does block the rendering of the web page, it stops the web page from appearing to the user and they don't see anything. And that is not good for performance because if the user can't see anything, they will leave your web page. So deferring JavaScript or making JavaScript download and compile in the background is really important to allow the web page to appear first. So that is the JavaScript compilation, and that's this part of the rendering process. So just to go over again, what the browser does when it starts to render a page is it creates a document object model, it creates a CSM object model, it does preload scanning, it fetches all the essential resources in the background to stop bottlenecking. And if there's JavaScript to compile, it also compiles the JavaScript. So this is how the browser works in terms of creating and appearing a web page to the user. Now, as I said before, I will attach a resource to this video where you can go and find out in more detail about how browsers work. And it's really important as an SEO because knowing this will give you more knowledge and more ammunition when it comes to talking to developers, which we're going to find out later on in the course. So keep watching.